welcome to NAPOD, where we provide NA speaker meetings and workshops in a podcast. We are an ad-free podcast, and if you enjoy listening, please help us to be self-supporting by visiting napod.xyz, look for the donate link, and drop $1 or $2 in the virtual basket. If you're also in AA or have friends that are, please tell them about our other podcast, Sobercast. Sobercast features AA speakers and workshops in the same format as NAPOD. We upload a new speaker every day, and it's easy to subscribe by searching for Sobercast, that's 2 words, on any podcast player app, or go to Sobercast.com. Enjoy the podcast, and thanks for listening.
Is this okay? Can you hear me? I can scream loud enough. I probably don't even need it. And my home group is the Up on Hope group in Lovell, Wyoming. We have had until recently, because one of our members moved away, we had 3 home group members. Now we have 2. So it's one of those really fun and exciting groups. But our mother group, or maybe I shouldn't use that term, group is PAL, is the Alive and Free group, and they come over and support us a lot, of which Carla's a wonderful member. And we really appreciate that. Thanks to all of you, my sponsors through the years, but especially the wonderful grace of my higher power. I haven't found it necessary to use since October 7th of 1977. And for that, I'm really grateful. And the reason why I say that isn't to attract interest, it's just because it's great hope. You know, when I first came in here and I heard the people had, like someone said yesterday, a year, I was sure I was positive that they were lying, you know, because it just couldn't happen. This morning, I'd like, if this is what ends up happening, I'd like to talk about my spiritual journey in Narcotics Anonymous. And I was thinking on the way down here, and as I was praying this morning, that this is a really vulnerable time for me, because my partner of 18 years just passed on exactly 4 weeks ago, right now, like almost literally this hour. And I thought, I don't think I've ever felt more vulnerable. And then I thought, but I've been saying to myself all along, I'm with people who love me, and it doesn't really even matter whether they know my name. And then the other thing I thought was, what do you mean, Kate, you haven't ever been this vulnerable? I was way, way more vulnerable using, except I didn't want anybody to know it. And I was a kind of a street chick in the 60s and 70s, and, you know, in Pittsburgh, and you're vulnerable there, and somebody's going to eat you up. So when I came in here in Billings, Montana, after a geographical cure course to the west, I was so vulnerable. I was so exhausted and so legally screwed that but I couldn't see that you were going to love me until I could learn to love myself. But that's exactly, you know, what has happened to me. My vulnerability, like I said, initially was based on big legal problems. I had tried to kill my roommate. And, but I mean, I hadn't done anything to her, so I didn't think should be that big of a deal, but it was to other people. And, so I had to get a serious stint going in recovery instead of just kind of like in and out when things got too bad legally. Luckily then, there wasn't, you know, like the heavy duty legal system there is now, about the deteriorating addict. I mean, in terms of they didn't make you go to treatment, or there really wasn't much treatment then. This was in the mid-70s, and here, and they just a lot of judges didn't even like insist that you go to any 12-step meetings. But luckily the judge I had, who was Judge Hernandez, I don't know if he's still alive or... Oh, a few people know him. Oh, gee. That's amazing. Well, at that time, he was young, and he was kind of, like out of the mainstream. He just did whatever he wanted to do. And he had a very strong stand that people who were loaded when they got in trouble, should have the opportunity to get some help. And so he absolutely demanded that that's exactly what I do. And I had absolutely no money, and the only place to go for treatment if you didn't have any money was Warm Springs. And there was a waiting list, like 6-month waiting list. So I was just, thrown into the program. And the first place that I started to learn anything about myself as a spiritual being after I came in here, and anything about being able to be vulnerable, was with my first sponsor. She was, not like real cuddly. She wasn't the cuddly type. She was kind of the cut and dry, do it or die kind of type. But she loved me, and because she loved all women that, to whom she could carry the message. And she told me at the very beginning, your purpose for the rest of your life is to carry the message to the still suffering woman addict. That's it. That is your purpose in life. And that she believed that that's why her higher power, whom she called God, had saved her from dying, was so that she could carry the message. And she had 13 years at the time, and she had cancer. And she didn't miss a beat. And cancer in the mid-70s wasn't, what cancer is today. There really wasn't. She suffered a great deal. But she was my sponsor for 2 years until she passed on. And she taught me the strongest sense, probably, that I've ever had, since then even, of what we're about. And that we're about, not much more than carrying the message. And that all of the times that I've gotten way over here, way over there, way over wherever, whether it's in a service meeting or in a Narcotics Anonymous meeting or, in a home group business meeting, group conscience meeting, there's always a place for me to come back to, and that's the simplicity of our purpose, our primary purpose, and my personal primary purpose. And I'm really grateful for that. When I came in here, I had been raised as a Catholic kid in a family that was first generation immigrants from Eastern Europe, from Croatia. One side of the family that was really significant to me. And so they were kind of a very conservative, rosary praying, Holy Mary kind of Catholics. I don't know how else to put it. And I was raised a lot by my grandma and grandpa, and who were, spoke actually 5 languages, and were immigrants from Eastern Europe. So my upbringing was very religious, and not in a bad way. And I don't have any resentments like a lot of people do about their religious upbringing, but they couldn't afford to send us to, private, Catholic school, parochial school. So I didn't have all that, getting beaten up by the nun stuff or whatever. I don't have those kind of memories, so that's nice. But that's my base. That was my base of operation about God. I left home when I was 16 and hit the streets. And occasionally things would get bad enough that I would want to find some kind of a solution. And in the 70s, there were, everybody became drug addicts, and then everybody got saved, and then everybody got gay. I don't know. Back east, that's what happened. Seems like that's the way that went. It was just amazing. I mean, droves of people. So at one point in time, droves of people were getting saved. in kind of like a non-denominational Christian kind of a way. So I did that a few times, and like got drowned in rivers and baptismals and whatever, and I had some pretty amazing religious experiences through the course of all that. So then that was there, but of course, my God was chemicals. That other stuff could only last so long. It held nothing compared to what chemicals could do for me. So there was all that. And then, of course, with Ram Dass and tripping all the time and all that stuff, there was the Eastern religious experience. So I did, at least transcendental meditation, which was, pretty neutral, and then got hooked up a couple times with, heavy meditative practices and whatever. They were great, too. I mean, you can get some real adrenaline going in some of these, religious experiences. And I did. And I'm a drama queen, so I kind of loved the parts where you could pass out because you're having such a wonderful religious experience, even though it was probably from the drugs you used. But you could convince yourself that it was, from this experience you were having. And so I had a whole bunch of that kind of mishmash, through my 20s, and until I ran away and ended up in Billings, Montana. And so when I came in, and I got to, the first step, we did the first step, and the second step was, pretty acceptable and returned me to sanity. I was definitely nuts. But I could not get anywhere else at that point in time. This is the last time I got clean. And my sponsor would say to me, the third step is simply making a decision. You don't have to make a religious decision. You don't have to make even a spiritual decision. You don't have to nothing. Just make a decision to continue on, and that will be enough to start with. But I couldn't, because I believed in nothing. And I wasn't an atheist. I just believed in nothing. I couldn't believe in any of the things that I had experienced because they all failed me. None of them got me better. And I couldn't believe in the God of my childhood because it was just too, religious. And I had nowhere to go with that whole thing. My sponsor started me out on what she called plastic prayers. That she kind of told me what to say in the morning and at night. Get up in the morning and say, please keep me clean today. That's a prayer. Say that. Then at night, say, thank you for keeping me clean today. I was like, what am I saying it to? And she was like, it doesn't make any difference. You don't need to worry about what's out there. You just need to do the practice, the spiritual practice. And you'll be amazed. And wow, I was amazed. It didn't take long. I think I had about 3 months clean when I actually realized that I had 3 months without putting any chemical in my body, and that had the first inkling that maybe it had something to do with that morning and evening prayer, like so many of you said it had to do with. But that's about, as far as I could go. So when I got to the third step, how am I going to do the third step? How am I going to turn my life over to something that doesn't exist? I can't even picture what it could be, so how can I do it, And I wasn't inclined to listen to my sponsor on that subject until I had plotted going to, of all places, Hardin. I think it's because I knew some people who had a house who definitely weren't clean, who lived there probably. But to go to Hardin and get really loaded. I didn't do that, but I still didn't do the third step. And then I found myself standing in front of, and this was like the last thing in the world I would have chosen to do to lose recovery. Standing in the front of what was then, there was Albertsons at the mini mall over on Grand, and there was a bar. I think it was the Red Robin or something like that. Standing in front of it, and there was this is in the days where there were actually telephones, there was a payphone here, and there was the door to the bar there, and I was standing between the two, and pretty well established that I was going to go in and get blotto drunk. Could at least do that. And I looked at the phone, and I looked at the door, and I looked at the phone, and I looked at the door, and And what I believe now is those plastic prayers, morning and at night, and every once in a while some other kind of a thing that now I would call prayer, that then I would just call wishful thinking, must have had some effect, because I chose the phone instead of the barred door and called anybody I could think of, and I didn't get anyone. Didn't get one human, not one human. So all that was left was a higher power that I didn't believe in. Because everybody was at work, functioning. I couldn't work. I couldn't work very well. My first job was at the Lincoln Hotel. If you've lived in Billings long enough, when it was a hotel, it's now I think it's the women's shelter. But it was a dive hotel. That was my job. That's the only job that I could do. That was just a couple days a week. So everybody else was working. So I walked, didn't have a car, didn't have a phone. I walked back to my place, and I spent the entire rest of the day screaming, "Fine, I've made a decision, fine, I've made a decision," and other words that I don't use anymore because I don't care to, over and over and over and over again until I was just absolutely exhausted. And my roommate, whom I had tried to kill, who still lived with me, go figure. Luckily, she got into Al-Anon and has stayed there the rest of her life. Good thing. She never moved out. It was like, whatever. Anyway, she came home. And so then I didn't want to be like screaming and running around the house anymore. And we had a conversation, and then I walked to see my sponsor, and I took the third step by simply saying the third step. I mean, I couldn't even get a prayer out of it just by simply saying, okay, I've made a decision. The decision is to turn my will and my life over to a higher power that I don't believe in, that I have no clue whether it exists or not, and I'm going to move on. And that was enough. That was a big turning point for me in recovery. So if there's any of you out there, or if you know someone who is starting out atheistic or so agnostic or so disappointed in experiences they've had with whatever, any kind of a religion, who feels really stuck, the plastic prayers work just fine. Now, they wouldn't have worked for me, I don't think, all these years. I don't think that would have happened, but it was plenty for me the first about year and a half. That was a turning point for me spiritually. I wouldn't have said that then, but it was the place where, because I chose the phone instead of the barred door, I decided that there very well might be something. And then I spent, I would say, let's see, I bet you I spent 5 or 6 years after that faithfully using the discipline of morning and evening prayer and kind of expanding that to include actual, like, some canned prayers, not like the Lord's Prayer, but certainly the Serenity Prayer, a couple prayers from my childhood that I really liked, that I could remember, a mantra that somebody gave me, trying to think, because I still use all of those things, which ones were there then. But anyway, kind of gradually some of that stuff started building for me until I had I would say by 5 or 6 years, I had a very clear picture that there was at least like some blob of the universe somewhere that actually had some direct connection to me as a human and had this desire for happiness, joy, and freedom for me, like it says in the book. I'm not sure how much of a feeling I had for happiness, joy, and freedom for me, but that this higher power had that, and that you all had that. That you had a desire for happiness, joy, and freedom for me in my life, in recovery. About that time, I had to hire somebody professionally because a lot of the things that had happened to me in childhood were, starting to surface. Sexual abuse, and then, being on the streets, prostitution, rape, whatever. A lot of sexual stuff had started to surface. And when I started seeing that person, I was living in Red Lodge, but they were here in Billings. They were, unbeknownst to me, they were, go figure, my higher power appointed this person as a counselor who was an ex-Catholic priest. I mean, I didn't know that, and he certainly didn't advertise it, but I mean, ultimately found that out. So he had a comfortable, relaxed spiritual life, that's what I would say, that I found really attractive, that would come up in counseling sessions around, because, you know, he knew the recovery program had to be based on a higher power keeping me clean, so there had to be somewhere that I had a spiritual relationship, and he didn't avoid that in sessions. And I would say there was the place where I entertained some considerations for even religious, considering some Western religious kind of a connection. So I went to, at that point, then I went to some different like Christian churches, including the Catholic Church, and even like, because I love music, even stayed to do music at the Catholic Church in Red Lodge for I think a year or two. I was the music director, and I got to, you know, do a lot of dramatic, like little skits and things, and that was all really fun. But it was fun. It wasn't, and it was fun. It was fun, but it wasn't a direct. I don't know how else to describe this. It wasn't a direct part of my spiritual life 100%. Partially because the variety of beliefs that I had at that time that were really important to me didn't match a specific religion. They were way too kind of out there, you know, to fit. And so when it came down to discussions, to sitting around having discussions, and here I am in the program, and we try to be rigorously honest, I couldn't avoid talking about my belief in reincarnational cycles, or I couldn't avoid, you know what I mean, and it did not match up to any of the churches I went to, and some humans found it really offensive. My beliefs really offensive. And so I ultimately wasn't invited anymore to be like a kind of a public figure, you know, at any of the churches. But it was a good time in my life, and it was a time in my life too where I developed a really wonderful neutral sense, or I think a loving sense of the variety of spiritual beliefs that we in recovery, and that other people who don't have to do, you know, any of this stuff have, as opposed to a need to degrade or be harsh about somebody else's belief system. So that was a really big breakthrough for me. You know, as a hippie, I was pretty clear that if it feels good, do it. You know, I don't have any, you know, you do yours and I'll do mine, and hey, man, you know, we all love each other and all that stuff. But I was very bigoted and prejudiced about a lot of different things, and you know, that gradually came out as recovery went on, that I had a lot of issues, and I had a lot of issues with religion, with Christian religion, not with Christianity, not with Jesus Christ, but with people saying they were Christians and persecuting others, and I just had this whole like list of hideous stuff that I could never get over about religion. And so being involved, albeit temporarily, with some of those churches, I developed a much better understanding of what they could provide for a person, whether it was one of us or anybody, you know, who was seeking a spiritual experience. And that was wonderful for me. And that's the phase where I started to seriously think about my higher power as the ultimate expression of love. And that those years, you know, loaded, days on end, speeding our brains out, talking about the universe and fitting it all together, and I know somehow that all was perfect when we were, you know, completely blotto, but could never remember what it was that was so perfect, that somewhere in there was the love concept, you know, peace, love, you know, and that was a part of me. That was a part of me that I found from a conservative immigrant family in Pittsburgh place to on the streets, you know, wild, crazy hippie place. That was something that I really didn't have to be abandoned because I was clean. I didn't have to abandon the idealistic sense that everybody is absolutely wonderful, and that we do love each other back to health, and that my carrying the message to other women that my first sponsor taught me was really all about love. And so my higher power really started to develop around the concept of love, a loving higher power. And I don't mean love in the abstract sense. I mean a specific sense of a God sense, or that people would call kinds of different things, that was based on a kind of way of loving that would never make sense to me as a human, that I would never be able to understand, but that would be my spiritual ideal. And I think that was the first directly spiritual ideal that I developed, and that was at about, 7 or 8 years, that I could define, and that I believed in, and that I knew was a part of who I am, and that would that I could build on, instead of I have to abandon. Go to this one, go to that one, blah blah blah. There's no. I don't see any way of knowing how long I'm supposed to talk, or I just realized there's no clock anywhere, so I have no clue what's going on. Can anybody tell me? What time is it?
2 hours left, Katy.
Oh, gee. What? 2 minutes?
2 hours.
Oh, 2 hours left. Okay, it's 10:43. All right. And that has held me that has been the base that I've operated out of since then. And I've had unbelievable, miraculous, issue. Oh, I can't see without glasses. And oh, that's a nice big one. Okay, that will work. Thank you. I think I can even see that. How do you make it go on, though? I'm not very good with phones. It's dead. Do I just touch it? Sorry, guys. I'm trying to get this together. What do I do to make it keep? Oh, up there. Okay. All right, got it. Okay. So, love. We're at love here. And to me, that was and has remained the most profound set of things that happened to me to date, spiritually, was to, partially it was like accepting my history, having spiritual parts to it, even though it was in terrible drug addiction, deteriorating madness. Part of it was that. That was really, really wonderful, really comforting to me, and still is. Part of it was the relief, I guess, of defining something more clearly, like defining what I wanted to pursue believing in, and also what I didn't want to pursue, believing in. And part of it was just the tenderness of having a personal relationship with a higher power. Part of it was that. That was the place where I started to feel what I call warmth, feel the gentleness, the unconditional love from a higher power. Although my higher power had been keeping me clean all this time. And I had been sincerely trying to work on developing something more specific. That was just wonderful for me, for that to occur. And I think in long-term recovery, as I hear other people talk, that happens for everyone. For a percentage of people, it happens when they go back to a religion or a belief system of their childhood. People talk that way. And I think that's a really good place to explore it, and I did, and I'm really glad that I did. To the extent that I say the rosary almost every day, but I don't say it the way the Catholics say it. The rosary's beads, prayer beads. Well, a lot of religions use prayer beads to keep track of stuff. So I have my Grammy, who died at the age of 96 when I was in my mid-50s. So I had my Grammy till I was in my mid-50s. I have one of her rosaries her daily rosary, the one she prayed the rosary every day, and I have that and I use that, and that's a very Catholic thing, believe me, in terms of the rosary. I just do it in a way that makes sense to me. I do it to keep track of praying for others, praying for my sponsees, praying for my sponsor, praying for family of origin members, praying for members of my home group. I just use it that way. I use two mantra, actually, as part of saying the rosary, and other meditations that were given to me. One that came back to me from my loaded years. That's absolutely, I just love the thing. I don't even know what it means. I don't know what the words translate to, but I love it. It's wonderful. And another one that I know exactly what it means that somebody gave me in recovery. That's wonderful. Anyway, from that place at 8, 9, 10 years, I started experiencing, before then, I quickly, in recovery, started experiencing those things that I would have been always convinced were a coincidence as spiritual events. If I thought of somebody, once I had a phone, if I thought of somebody and my phone rang and it was them, that was, the first couple times. But after that, it was like, whoa, this has something to do with this whole thing out here, man. This whole, higher power thing. But, I didn't, cry every time it happened because it was such a profound, wonderful thing. But ultimately, for me, after I got that more personal love connection, I could really begin to enjoy those spiritual events in my daily life. And I'm a little spoiled. I have an expectation that I'm going to have them just about every day, a few times a day maybe even, that I'm going to have some miraculous thing happen. Well, that I see miraculous. Now, there are people who don't, like I said, let me think of an example. Oh, I'm going to get I lost my sponsor. I had a sponsor who's in Texas, and she has MS, multiple sclerosis. Had MS. Has MS, I guess. She still does. And she was deteriorating really rapidly. And we met 3 times a year, but otherwise she sponsored me on the phone. We talked on the phone for 2 hours every week. And it reached a point where she couldn't talk on the phone. And so her significant other is who I would meet with on the phone most of the time, and she would kind of try to translate, my sponsor's stuff. And it just reached a point where Nancy couldn't sponsor me anymore. And so I had to get another sponsor, and I was brokenhearted about it. And I was going to this weekend event, and I thought, well, this will be the perfect place for my higher power to give me a sponsor. And I get at the event. There's lots of women. There's lots of women who, would be great sponsor for me. So I said to my higher power, you're going to have to point out my sponsor. I don't have a clue, and I can't do it. You just have to point out my sponsor to me. And into my mind, now this is a voice, in my mind. The name, and in my mind comes Carla. Okay? I look around. I know most of these women. I look around. There's only one woman named Carla. It's not this Carla here. There's one woman named Carla. And I say to myself, well, it can't be her. Couldn't possibly be her. She only has maybe 5 years. And I have 20-some years. So that couldn't be Carla. That Carla. So I ignored it. That was Friday. So Saturday afternoon, I'm sitting there, and of course I'm telling my higher power, please, I want a sponsor. Tell me who my sponsor's supposed to be. And it's Carla. I'm like, oh, fuck. Oh, I don't even talk that way. Ask these guys in my home group. I do not talk like that, do I? I don't. They always laugh whenever I swear because I don't swear very often. But I thought that, I have to be honest. And I said, okay, fine. There's only one Carla here. I'm going to march right up to Carla and ask her to be my sponsor. And I did, and she said, I can't be your sponsor. I said, why not? She said, well, I have 5 years and you have 25 years. And I was like, well, look, I don't know what else to tell you, but God told me in words 2 times, 2 days in a row, to ask you to be my sponsor. And she said, well, I got to go talk to my sponsor. Well, her sponsor was like out to lunch or something. I mean, like literally out to lunch. And so we went and talked to her sponsor. And, I said, okay, well, here's what happened. And Carla's the only Carla here. And then, and Carla says, I can't be her sponsor. I don't have enough time. That would never work. And I'm like, it's not exactly who I'd pick either, but, I don't know what else to tell you. And her sponsor says, well, I'm not God, and neither one of you are God, and there is a higher power, and if Kate thinks her higher power told her to get you as a sponsor, you better be her sponsor. And she has been my sponsor ever since then, 12 years, and she is the flawlessly perfect sponsor for me. We have had adventures that are unbelievable. And, yeah, it's just perfect. So, those kind of things, those are big miracles to me. I don't, run around saying, oh, God told me to tell you. Every once in a while I do, but not usually. That you shouldn't wear that jacket anymore because it's kind of too brown or whatever, But I certainly feel compelled sometimes to say things, and like everybody else, I make lots of mistakes. I feel compelled to say things spiritually that are like the farthest thing from anything spiritual that could possibly exist. Probably every bit as often, as compelled directly by my higher power to do it. And there are ways that I believe that I have to prevent some of that, but I don't listen to them most of the time. Like when I'm compelled to do something, to actually take a break and think it through or pray it through and, kind of sit with it for a little bit. Or if it's a really big thing, probably call my sponsor and say, and she's used to this, and she's like, whatever, could she say, God told me to be for her to be my sponsor. She can't say too much about this stuff. Anyway, but she's very good at saying, direct things that are not spiritual principles that I might be involved in, like control, management of someone else, getting a little over the top, thinking I have rights as a sponsor about things that are none of my business, So she's a really good checkout place for me. I love having grand spiritual experiences. I really do. Like the big ones. Because they're fun. And they're this wonderful reinforcement. Like if somebody comes up to me and says, oh my goodness, you're Katy Williamson. You're not going to believe this, but I was praying, blah, 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 and I had this really strong thing. You're going to meet this person named Katy Williamson, and you can tell her she's kind of on the right track. To me, that's like, oh my goodness, God's like given me, and it's always when it's the worst low times for me. And that's great. I love that stuff. But I have to be satisfied for most of the time, and I want to be satisfied most of the time with the daily miracles. Going to a meeting and seeing someone who is in terrible, sweating, vomiting condition a week before looking a lot better. To me, that's miraculous. Because none of us are supposed to be doing that. We're supposed to be continuing to try to stop sweating and vomiting and all of that stuff, We're not supposed to be getting through those things without using. Or going outside and having a hummingbird, fly past me. To me, that's absolutely miraculous because I can't even fathom how a hummingbird could exist. And I think they're actually not supposed to exist, I think there's something about them that's like against some physics, something or other. I knew that once, but I don't remember it. It might have been when I was loaded. I thought I knew that. I never know about that stuff. And I have expectations, like at this place in my life where my partner has passed on, and neither he nor I had any problems with his passing. He was 87 years old. Had a wonderful, the guy was amazing, wild, strange dude, artist guy. And we had no problem with the sense that he certainly wasn't going to rot in the ground somewhere, that he was passing on, that he was dropping his body, he was getting rid of something that wasn't working anymore. But I have yet, it's been a month, and I have yet to, and I, reminded him before he passed on, like, you gave me a commitment that you'd show up at some point in time and just give me that reassurance that, stuff's okay with you. And I haven't gotten that yet. And so for me, being patient sometimes spiritually is a difficult thing. I had a little bit of an expectation that within 24 hours of his passing, he would take the time to, reassure me that everything was just fine. Well, he's a busy dude. It's a big change. It takes a while to get used to. And he hasn't gotten around to it yet, But in my belief system, he will. And it doesn't matter to me whether he will by my seeing an eagle flying over my car or by some human telling me that Bill's doing just fine, or what it is. It doesn't make any difference. I know it will happen, and I know I'll recognize it, and I'm so grateful for that. And Narcotics Anonymous gives me that freedom, to have a spiritual life and to have a real joy in that. When I was still using, at one point in time, I had this heavy-duty spiritual experience of these two angels saving me from Lincoln Creek and Glacier National Park, where I was loaded and trying to cross a stream, and instead crashed down the stream when it was a high water kind of thing, when everything, big melt-off in the end of June. And I had a physical experience of two angels removing me from the water and setting me, on the shore. And for about 2 days, that was it. I was never going to use a drug again. I mean, how could I ever use a drug again when I physically saw two angels and they picked me up and put me on the shore and my backpack, which was gone. And so, like when I came to and realized, okay, that was two angels, and then I looked down, there's my backpack, I was like, whoa, this is so heavy, I'm done. I'm never, ever going to touch a chemical again. And it lasted until I got out of the wood. I had to hike back out, and that took a couple days. By the time I got out, I had two legs that were swollen like this, that were totally black because of all the damage that I'd incurred going down, banging down the stream through the rocks. Was immediately taken to the hospital, was in the hospital for a month. But I managed within about 3 days, of course I also got drugs in the hospital, but they weren't my drugs of choice, so that didn't really count. But I managed to get people, and this is in Glacier, and I lived in Pittsburgh. I managed to get people, local people, to bring me chemicals into the hospital. So it's a good figure, you know what I mean? What sense does that make? But I guess what I'm saying is the extremity of wonderful spiritual experiences or religious experiences when I was deteriorating had so little value to me compared to the wonderfulness of the variety of chemicals that I used, that there was no comparison. But the variety of experiences I have had clean, spiritually, are so out there and so wonderful that I can't even describe them half the time. And it's all because of, as I said, all of you in these rooms, strong sponsorship, and a higher power that didn't need me to say who it was. Didn't need me to define that, just needed me to slightly surrender those first couple years and then surrender to the third step and ultimately be willing, to be a spiritual being in a human body. There's a little tiny phrase that I want to sing for you I don't really want to, actually. I don't want to sing this. I don't want to sing in front of all of you at all. But I'm going to, I think. If I can remember it, let me think now. Just a minute, give me a minute. That really embodies for me the simple reminders of my higher power. God is love, and they who abide in love abide in God, and God in them. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Please help us improve our ranking so others can find us by putting a review on Stitcher, iTunes, or your favorite podcast index. NAPOD is ad-free thanks to the folks supporting the show with $1 or more per month. If you enjoy listening, you can join them by going to napod.xyz and looking for the donate link. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.